The receipt lay on the scarred Formica table like a silent, brutal accusation, the white paper gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. In the space where a tip should have been written, a space where Sarah usually looked for the difference between paying the electric bill or eating plain rice for another week, there was nothing but a heavy, deliberate zero. It wasn't a mistake. The pen stroke was thick and final, a circle that felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Sarah Bennett stood frozen in the middle of the bustling diner, the cacophony of clinking silverware and sizzling grease fading into a dull roar in her ears. She was 27 years old, but in that moment, she felt ancient, weathered by a life that demanded everything and returned almost nothing. Before we unravel the mystery of the empty tip jar and the secret hidden beneath the china, if you believe that sometimes our biggest blessings come wrapped in our hardest moments, please hit that subscribe button. Join our community of hope. Share this video with someone who is fighting a silent battle. And let's remind the world that kindness is never wasted. Now, let's step into Sarah's shoes. Sarah was a woman who wore exhaustion like a second skin, a uniform stitched invisibly beneath her stained apron. She was a single mother to 4-year-old Lily, a bright-eyed girl who loved coloring books and asking questions Sarah couldn't always answer. They lived in a small, drafty apartment on the edge of Oak Haven, a town that existed in the gray area between forgotten and overlooked. Her mornings began long before the sun dared to crest the horizon, in the blue-black hours where anxiety usually sat heaviest on her chest. She would pack snacks for Lily, counting out crackers with the precision of a diamond merchant, before dropping her off at a neighbor's house. Then came the double shifts. Sarah poured coffee for truckers who were too tired to speak and locals who talked too much, moving with a practiced efficiency that hid the fact that her feet felt like they were bleeding inside her cheap sneakers. She smiled when she wanted to scream, apologized for mistakes she didn't make, and absorbed the casual cruelties of the service industry because she had no other choice. She was the architect of her own survival, building a life on a foundation of crumbling pennies and sheer willpower. The afternoon had been particularly brutal, a relentless parade of demanding customers and spilled drinks that left her nerves frayed. The diner was decorated with sad, drooping tinsel for the holiday season, a festive mockery of the cold reality outside. The wind howled against the plate glass windows, threatening snow, while inside, the air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and desperation. Sarah checked her watch every 10 minutes, calculating the remaining hours of her shift against the mounting pile of bills taped to her refrigerator door. Rent was due in 10 days. The number floated in her mind, a terrifying figure that seemed to grow larger every time she looked at it. She needed a miracle, or, at the very least, a good night of tips. But the jar by the register was pitifully light, filled mostly with silver coins and sympathy. She wiped down the counter, her movements mechanical, her mind drifting to Lily. She wondered if her daughter was warm enough, if she was happy, if she sensed the panic that hummed constantly beneath her mother's skin. Sarah pushed the thoughts away. Panic cost energy she didn't have. She just had to keep moving, keep pouring, keep smiling. Then he walked in. The door chimed, admitting a gust of freezing air and a man who seemed to silence the room simply by existing. He didn't announce himself, didn't demand a booth, didn't wave for attention. He simply stood there, removing leather gloves with a slow, deliberate grace that spoke of a lifetime of having nowhere to rush to. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, wearing a charcoal coat that was tailored to perfection, the kind of fabric that didn't just repel the cold, but ignored it entirely. His name, printed later on the credit card slip that would break Sarah's heart, was Arthur Sterling. It was a name that commanded boardrooms and shifted markets in the city. But here in Oak Haven, he was just another stranger passing through. Yet, he wasn't just another customer. There was a gravity to him, a quiet authority in the way he scanned the room, his eyes sharp and assessing, missing nothing. He spotted an empty booth in the back corner, away from the noise of the kitchen, and moved toward it with a stride that was both elegant and weary. Sarah felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the draft. She grabbed a menu and a pot of fresh coffee, instinctively straightening her apron. She approached his table with the professional warmth she had perfected over years of servitude. "Welcome in," she said, her voice steady despite the fatigue dragging at her vocal cords. "Coffee to start." The man looked up, and for a second, Sarah felt pinned by his gaze. His eyes were a piercing gray, intelligent and unreadable. He nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. "Black, please." And the menu. She poured the coffee, watching the steam curl into the air between them. He didn't smile, didn't make small talk about the weather or the holidays. He simply watched her hands as she placed the mug down, noting the tremor she tried to hide, the redness of her knuckles from scrubbing tables with harsh chemicals. Sarah took his order, the daily special, simple and unpretentious, and retreated to the kitchen. Throughout the meal, she treated him with an attentiveness that bordered on devotion, not because she expected a reward, but because it was who she was. She refilled his cup before it was empty. She brought extra napkins without being asked. She checked on him, sensing a melancholy in his solitude that mirrored her own. She poured her kindness into the service, unaware that she was being tested in a way she could never imagine. The man ate in silence, consuming the meal with a mechanical precision that suggested food was merely fuel, not enjoyment. Sarah watched him from the corner of her eye while she bussed a nearby table of rowdy teenagers. There was something profoundly lonely about him, a solitude that seemed chosen rather than inflicted. Every time she approached the table, he would pause, looking at her with that same intense, assessing gaze, as if he were trying to solve a complex equation written on her face. He never spoke more than was necessary. "Thank you. That will be all. Check, please." His voice was low, cultured, a baritone that didn't belong in a diner that smelled of grease and sanitizer. Sarah felt a strange compulsion to comfort him, to ask if he was okay, but the invisible wall of his wealth and reserve kept her at bay. She simply did her job, delivering excellent service to a man who gave her nothing back but politeness. When he finally signaled for the check, the diner had quieted down, the lunch rush receding like a tide, leaving behind debris. Sarah printed the slip, her heart doing its usual anxious flutter as she hoped, prayed for a generous tip. Even $10 would buy milk and bread. She placed the black folder on the table. "Whenever you're ready," she said softly. He didn't look at the bill immediately. Instead, he looked at her. "You have a child," he stated. It wasn't a question. Sarah blinked, surprised. She touched the pocket of her apron where a crayon drawing of a lopsided sun peeked out. Lily's masterpiece from that morning. "Ah, yes. A daughter. Lily." The man nodded slowly, as if this confirmed a hypothesis. "She is lucky," he said enigmatically. Then he opened the folder, slid a sleek black credit card inside, and handed it back. Sarah ran the card at the register, feeling the weight of his stare on her back. When she returned with the receipt for him to sign, he took the pen, wrote quickly, and stood up. He didn't say goodbye. He simply buttoned his coat, adjusted his collar, and walked out into the biting wind without looking back. Sarah watched him go, feeling a strange sense of deflation. She walked to the table to clear the dishes, picking up the receipt he had left on the vinyl tablecloth. Her eyes went immediately to the tip line. Her breath hitched, then stopped. 0. A slash through the line. Total, $14.50. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The disappointment was physical, a punch to the gut that left her gasping. It wasn't just the money, though God knew she needed the money. It was the dismissal. She had given him her best. She had been kind, attentive, human. And he had looked at her, acknowledged her child, and then decided she was worth nothing. The 0 stared up at her, mocking her effort, mocking her struggle. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, hot and sudden. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron, forcing them back. She couldn't cry. Crying was a luxury for people who had time to fall apart. She was Sarah Bennett, and she had tables to turn. She angrily grabbed the empty coffee mug, her grip white-knuckled. She snatched up the silverware, the clatter loud in the quiet diner. "It's fine," she whispered to herself, a lie she told 100 times a day. "It's just money. You're fine." But she wasn't fine. She was tired. She was broke. and she was starting to lose the fragile hope that kept her upright. She reached for the dinner plate, intending to stack it on the tray and wipe the table clean of his memory. She pulled the plate toward her, but it didn't slide smoothly across the table. It caught on something. There was resistance, a friction that shouldn't have been there. Sarah frowned, pausing in her anger. She set the silverware down and lifted the heavy ceramic plate, slower this time. There, resting innocently on the white tablecloth where the plate had been, was a folded piece of thick, cream-colored paper. It wasn't a napkin. It was stationery, expensive stationery, and written on the outside, in elegant, slanted handwriting, was a single name, Sarah. Her heart began to race, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Fear mixed with curiosity. Had she done something wrong? Was this a complaint letter? A reprimand? Her hands trembled as she set the plate down on the tray. She looked around the diner. The cook was scraping grill. The other waitress was on her phone in the back. No one was watching. She reached out and touched the paper. It felt heavy, textured, high quality. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. Inside, there was a handwritten note. The ink was dark blue, the script precise. "I watched you today," the note began. Sarah's stomach flipped. "I watched how you smiled when you were exhausted. I watched how you treated the man who yelled about his soup with patience he didn't deserve. I saw the drawing in your pocket and the way you touched it when you thought no one was looking. Most people work for a paycheck. Sarah, you work for a person. That is a rare distinction." Sarah leaned against the booth, her knees suddenly feeling like water. She read on. "The world is full of people who are loud about their success. I am interested in the people who are quiet about their strength. This is not a tip. A tip is payment for service. This is an investment in potential." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Tucked behind the heavy paper of the note was a business card embossed with gold lettering, and behind that, a folded rectangle of blue paper. A check. Sarah stared at the check, her vision blurring as her brain tried to comprehend the numbers written in the neat, confident hand of Arthur Sterling. It wasn't $1,000,000. Life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was $10,000. To a billionaire, it was pocket change, the cost of a suit or a dinner. To Sarah, it was a lifeline. It was rent for a year. It was a used car that didn't break down every Tuesday. It was a winter coat for Lily that actually fit. It was the ability to exhale for the first time in 4 years. She sat down heavily in the booth, the very seat Arthur had just vacated, and pressed the check to her chest, shutting her eyes tight. A sob escaped her, a raw, jagged sound that she quickly stifled with her hand. The relief was so intense, it was almost painful, washing over her in waves that left her dizzy. She looked at the business card again. Arthur Sterling, the Sterling Foundation. Underneath the title, a handwritten phone number and a short instruction. "Call me when you're ready to build something." It wasn't just charity. It was a door opening. That night, Sarah went home in a daze. The bus ride usually felt interminable, but tonight she floated through it. When she picked up Lily from the neighbors, she held her daughter tighter than usual, burying her face in the girl's soft, shampoo-scented hair. "Mommy, you're squishing me." Lily giggled, squirming in her arms. Sarah laughed, a sound that felt rusty in her throat. "I know, baby. I love you." She made dinner, real dinner, with fresh vegetables and meat, not just pasta, and watched Lily eat, feeling a strange, blooming warmth in her chest where the cold anxiety usually lived. She put the check in her jewelry box, treating it like a holy relic. She didn't deposit it immediately. She was terrified it might disappear, that it might be a cruel prank. But the next morning, after dropping Lily off, she sat in her beat-up sedan for 20 minutes, staring at the phone number. Her thumb hovered over the call button. The note had said opportunity. It had said potential. Did she have potential? She was just a waitress. But Arthur Sterling had seen something else. With a shaking breath, she dialed. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice professional and warm. She didn't ask who Sarah was. She seemed to be expecting the call. "Mr. Sterling is in a meeting, but he left instructions for you," the assistant said. That phone call was the beginning of a transformation that was slow, hard, and absolutely magnificent. Sarah didn't quit her job the next day. Arthur didn't believe in handouts that created dependency. He believed in empowerment. The money was a stabilizer, but the real gift was the mentorship. Over the next few months, Sarah met with foundation advisors. They didn't tell her what to do. They asked her what she saw. She told them about the diner, how inefficient the inventory was, how the scheduling hurt the single parents working there, how the community needed a place that felt like home, not just a pit stop. They gave her books on management, sent her to seminars, and eventually gave her a small grant to propose a modernization plan to the diner's owner. The owner, a tired man looking for an exit strategy, was stunned by the proposal Sarah laid out. It wasn't just a business plan, it was a vision. With the foundation's backing, Sarah became the manager, then a partner. She revamped the menu, fixed the scheduling to accommodate childcare needs for the staff, and turned the sterile, dying diner into a warm, vibrant community hub. Years passed. The diner was unrecognizable now. Walls painted a warm sage green, local art hanging where beer posters used to be, the smell of fresh herbs replacing the scent of burnt grease. Sarah stood by the counter, no longer wearing a stained apron, but a crisp blouse and blazer. She moved with confidence, directing staff, greeting regulars by name. In a corner booth, Lily, now a teenager, sat with her textbooks spread out, safe and proud of her mother. The bell above the door chimed. Sarah looked up. It was Christmas Eve again. A man in a charcoal coat walked in, older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes as sharp as ever. Arthur Sterling. He came once a year, on the anniversary of that first meeting. He never announced himself. He sat in the same booth. Sarah walked over, carrying a pot of coffee and a menu he never looked at. "Black, please," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And I hear the special is excellent." Sarah smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "It is," she said. "Welcome back, Mr. Sterling." He ate in silence, watching the bustling, happy restaurant, a localized economy of kindness he had sparked with a single note. When he left no tip on the credit card receipt, just a zero. But under the plate, there was always a note. This year, it read simply, "You built it." Sarah watched him walk out into the snow, knowing that the world doesn't always change with a bang. Sometimes, it changes in the quiet scratching of a pen, in the space between a zero and a check, and in the courage of a woman who just needed someone to see her. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Prime Stories. Let's keep telling stories that matter.